This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Lessons Learned. And if you don't know what Lessons Learned is about, well, please go check out the various shows we've done with various individuals and all different lifestyles, except they all can share at least one lesson that has made them the person they are today. And today I have Anita Hollander with us. And I met Anita on another podcast. And I remember sitting there listening to her and the host and thinking, gosh, there is so much more to this person than what we're learning. And so I thought, Anita, you'd be a great example to have on here today. And the interesting part is when you were sharing your life story, I realized that there were a lot of overlaps between you and I in many ways. And that's something else I want people to listen to because you may be meeting somebody for the first time and maybe they are a Broadway star and you think, I never would have met them. But guess what? You have met them. And how did they get from point A to point Z or somewhere in between? So, welcome, Anita.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here with you.
That's good. So, I sort of alluded something about a Broadway star. Um, but let's talk about, did you always have an idea that you were going to be in the entertainment field?
As a matter of fact, yes. The answer is unqualifiedly yes. I my first memories are me getting up on a stage when my family didn't even see it coming. A magician was setting up a magic show and asked the audience, does anybody want to come up and sing a song or something while we're setting up? And my mom said she didn't even notice that my 4-year-old body had left the audience and gone on the stage to sing a song from Guys and Dolls. I sang, I'll know when my love comes along. I was 4 years old. Nobody knew what I was singing because I had a tendency to trip all over myself to try to get all the words and everything. But I knew what I was doing. And they thought I was going to sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. And that was not what they got. And that really cracked up everybody. It was like, my mom was like, because I would dance in the living room to the Broadway albums my dad brought home. And I knew Guys and Dolls backwards and forwards. I knew Sound of Music. I knew all of these shows that were coming out at that time. And the interesting thing when you ask that question, did I always know? I'm fascinated with my 4-year-old self because while I was dancing to the living room to these Broadway albums, the living room was the theater. And then the hallway was my walk home in New York City, no less. The stairway was my apartment, and the front door area was the elevator. But the theater was around the corner in the living room. Well, I now live in Manhattan Plaza in the middle of New York City, 3 blocks from Times Square. I leave my building, I go down the elevator, I leave my building, walk around the corner, and there is a theater right there that I have performed at for years now. And it was sometime in all of this, I went, this is the exact route. This is the exact thing I imagined. So when Mr. Rogers says that childhood is a rehearsal for life, it was totally my rehearsal for life. I had it all mapped out, even down to recording studios. There's also a recording studio around the corner, and it's just me going to either a theater or a recording studio. I knew it all. Part of me thinks I am the reincarnation of my grandmother who died 6 years before I was born. She was a vaudeville singer dancer. We have a picture of her in a leopard skin leaning up against the proscenium arch. She was totally theater, totally entertainment. And my mom says, I look exactly like her. And I have a picture on my piano of me and my grandmother. And we're almost the same person.
How, you know, and as I hear you telling that story, I have to share with you my son, my youngest son, uh, fell in love with baseball at the age of 2.5, 3 years old, to the point that nobody in the family has ever had this type of fascination. And, we just took it for, oh, he's a toddler. He's watching it on TV with his dad, whatever. But it turns out that my grandfather, his great grandfather, who we never met, and my great uncle, uh, of course, who Alex never met, um, both tried to um, play baseball professionally. In fact, they played for what they called a barnstormers team um, back in the beginning of the century. And they were both asked to play for the Detroit Tigers farm team. I don't think they were called the Tigers at the time. And they came home, and my grandfather's mother looked at the two of them. And, she had migrated from Russia. She was trying to make a better life for her family. And she said to the two boys, only bums play baseball. And that was the end of it. They didn't even go back to play. And my son, his whole life, has always said, I'm going to, whether I play baseball or I work in baseball, that is my dream. And he has followed it ever since. So today is the opening day here in Cleveland, and he's at work. And I do believe that many of us have an idea when we're very young, and if we follow it, we get to where we really want to be.
It's
So
in our DNA, I guess.
I guess. So you had this dream as a little kid. You entertained your family. When did your family realize that they had to allow you to really do this?
Thank God for my family right away, right away. In fact, my dad was a cantor in the synagogue, as well as a lawyer in Cleveland. Also, Cleveland, yay. Um, and on weekends, he would be cantor at the synagogue, and on the weekdays, he was a lawyer. Bernard R. Hollander, a great guy, very musical. And his mom sang with the Cleveland Orchestra. That's the grandmother on his side. My other grandmother on my mom's side was vaudeville. So we've got the Cleveland Orchestra and vaudeville.
Wow.
We got a lot of music there. And my dad had us singing from the time we were able to stand. He would stand us up. There were four of us, four girls. And we started singing so early that we harmonized. And by the time I was in third grade or something, we were doing Cleveland television. People, your listeners may remember Gene Carroll's show, Young World, a lot of local television
Sure.
stuff, and shopping malls. Not my favorite thing, but we'd go around singing, the four of us, dressed alike. And my sister played guitar, and I was a lead singer, and my other sister was playing. There was a tambourine, and there were wood blocks. And I mean, Rachel was tiny then. She's this little peanut, and we all sang in four-part harmony. So they got us started early. They knew I loved theater, so I was doing children's theater and then the Cleveland Playhouse.
Right.
I went to very early. Actually did a play with Peter Ostrom, who ended up being Charlie from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. We did a play together. My cousin and I were the two queens in The Brave Little Tailor, and he was the tailor. So we had an early start. I was off and running. And when I was 8, my mom was so lovely about taking us to auditions. If she just said, you want to have some fun, you can go do an audition, and but as long as it was fun, not she never really emphasized the competition part of it. She just said, here's a fun experience. And my older sister and I went and auditioned for The Sound of Music at Music Carnival. I'm so glad I'm talking to a Clevelander, because
Yeah.
there are actually people who will know these
Understand.
places.
Right.
And Music Carnival being a summer stock professional equity theater, union theater, where they brought people from New York to play all the parts except for Sound of Music, because they got local children. And my sister and I auditioned, and we none of us expected this. We none of it expected to get a call, much less I got the call back. My sister Celia was the like perfect pitch, absolutely a whiz at music, could pick up any instrument and play it. I mean, I thought she was the shoe in. I was kind of klutzy, and I had do re mi written on my arm because it was the first time Sound of Music was brand new.
Right.
I mean, well, it was 1963, but it was pretty new in the regions. It was not new on Broadway, but so I get the call back, and I went and I sang do re mi up to fa. They stopped you after fa, and my hands were like this. They were down here, but they were my fingers together. And when I finished, they said, "What are you holding in your hands?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know." They were so sweet to me. And out of all the children they gathered, there were 250 kids who auditioned, and then they gathered callbacks. So there were like 2 or 3 for each role called back. And I ended up getting the understudy for Gretel because the girl playing Gretel, her mother was the wardrobe, in charge of wardrobe.
Okay.
And she was very talented, little girl, really sweet and very talented. And I was her understudy. I've never been so thrilled. I mean, I was like, okay. And then she was gracious enough, this little girl, to get German measles for 1 weekend. She got German measles, which put her out of the show for 3 nights. I got to go on. I thought she was the sweetest because the first thing that she told her mom was, "Now Anita gets to do this show."
Well, how nice.
She was sick, you know? So I got to do the show that weekend. And then they brought the show back a year later, and I got to play Marta. They said if I grew 2 inches, I could play Marta, and I did. So I had my own role the second year. But we had Wally Harper in the orchestra pit conducting, and he was Barbara Cook's musical director for all these years. I mean, I was working with these great people, Lawrence Brooks as the captain, and Judith McCulley as Maria, and we had Beatrice Krebs playing Mother Abbess. I mean, these were people who worked in New York, and in Beatrice worked in the opera, Metropolitan Opera. I mean, my first professional job at 8 years old was working with high class people. Otto Perchner was the director. I couldn't have been more lucky. And then from there, I was able to do anything. And I think that told me I could do anything. And my parents were totally on board. I mean, not everybody has parents who are like, you've obviously got something here. Even before I got that job, that audition, they knew that I had something. And boy, I look back on that and I feel so lucky, so
Well,
lucky.
and it sounds like you had almost the perfect parents in that it wasn't, hey, okay, my girls have talent, so now I'm going to take them to all these auditions and hope they get parts.
You've
It was
you've
like,
really put your finger on it. That was the thing. My mom, whose name is Iris November, just so everybody knows, because you may have seen her around Cleveland, she's everywhere. She would take me to auditions where we would see children being pushed by their parents. I learned what a stage mom was. I didn't know the term until we realized there were things called stage moms.
right,
My mom was not. She was like, we're just having fun. We're here to have fun. And these kids being pressured and pushed and having tantrums because they didn't want to be there. Consequently, fast forward into the future. My daughter, when she was little, I took her to a few auditions, and she wanted to go. And I said, look, as long as this is fun, we'll go. But if it stops being fun, we're not going to go, because you have to enjoy this. If you don't enjoy it, no use to be here. I would never push her, especially being in this business. I would never push a child into, and that may have been the thing about stage moms, that those who have actually been in the business often are much more reticent to get their children involved in it. And my daughter was very theatrical from the start. So I said, hey, there's this thing you want. Well, she was on All My Children when she was 5 weeks old. I admit she had no say in that. She was just born. Was her audition was literally 2 weeks after she was born. But my husband and I had been on All My Children a couple of times, and the casting director said, when is your due date? When I was pregnant. And I told her, and she said, bring her in the minute she's born. We need to see her for something. Because the character of Barbara on All My Children was going to have a baby right about that time. And so 2 weeks after she was born, I took her to the casting director. Her audition was just to see if she could deal with bright lights. She was so calm. She had this blissful face. She just looked like a little doll. And she didn't care about the bright lights. She was put into the arms of the casting director. Not a sound, not a fuss. And they went, okay, she's the perfect thing. But when we did a few weeks later, the shoot, she was 5 weeks old. They put her in the arms of a total stranger, a woman actress who was herself pregnant. And later on, once her own baby was born, they worked it out. But she was holding Holland, my daughter's Holland Hamilton, in her arms. And Holland didn't make a sound. She was just blissful. And they did the whole scene where the guy looks through the window and sees the baby. And she was in the nurse's arms. Sorry, she was in the nurse's arms. Another actress, and didn't move. And when the shoot was, they had stopped shooting, they said, can we take another take of that? Because she doesn't look real. She looks like a doll because she didn't move. She didn't do anything. Well, my daughter from 5 weeks old knew how to take direction, because the second take, she yawned, she stretched, she went, I mean, literally, this 5-week-old was suddenly animated, and they finished it and everyone was laughing because it was like, whoa, she really takes direction. And they used it. And it was the first time my family across the country saw the baby. They hadn't seen Holland. They said to us, sure, we had to watch her on national television to get a picture. We didn't have phones and stuff. You couldn't do like nowadays you can get everything, but we didn't have those. And we had a plain old camera that you had to get the thing processed, and you had to send them to people. There was nothing like we have today. It wasn't instant gratification. So the first time they saw, like the two grandmothers, the first time they saw their grandchildren was on national television. And it couldn't have been a better way to see her, because she literally did her baby repertoire.
I love it. I love it. So
I didn't push her after that. It was the beginning of her college fund. So I said, hey, we can be allowed to have our child on national TV so that she has money to start her college fund.
Well, what I'm hoping our listeners are hearing from you is something very important, that, we may have dreams for ourselves and for our children, but just because we have dreams doesn't necessarily mean that's the path we're going to take or we should take. And I know that when I was finishing up high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to be. I wanted to be in TV. I wanted to be doing broadcasting. Did not want to be on the radio. I really wanted to be Jane Pauley before Jane Pauley. And I remember when I was signing up for my classes, I called my parents long distance. And if people don't understand what that means, there was an extra cost to call, you know. And I said to my parents, these are the classes I can take. And they were all broadcasting classes. And my father said, what are you doing? And I said, well, they have two programs here. And one program is I can get my associate's degree first if I take all my major subjects. And then I can work and take the rest of my subjects, like English. And my father said, you're going to be a teacher. I said, no, that's not what I want to be, Dad. And he goes, talk to your mother. And my mother started up with, a nice Jewish girl gets a teaching degree and then you marry a doctor, and then you have children. And I said, not this girl. And they said, you better not sign up for those classes. But I did anyways. And when I was completing my associate's degree, I called them and I told them, and my mother said to me, we will not pay for college anymore. Because back in the 60s, they saw no future for me. And they saw no guy wanting to be with me because I was going to be struggling. And I gave it up, obviously. And when my son was graduating, my youngest son was graduating high school, I went back to school. I completed my bachelor's, got my master's, and I said, I know what I want to do. Now, TV was not as important to me as being able to be a catalyst to bring out messages. And when I started doing it, my mother looked at me and she said, why are you doing this? And I said, because it's been my dream. And she goes, I'm so glad you're following your dream. And I realized my parents, you know, probably were in the same generation area as your parents. However, um, they weren't as free thinking. They were sort of, this is what everybody else has done. This is what you need to do. And I refuse to do that with my sons. And, um, you may be happy following that dream, you may not be, but it's your choice. And you seem to be very happy in following your dreams, but you had a little setback a number of years ago.
Yeah, this must be a record that it took us 17 minutes to get to this thing that I'm about to say. And that's what I love about you, that you didn't start with that. There is a big thing that, as I tell kids when I'm working with them, that makes me unique and different. And I always tell kids, there's something unique about every single one of us. And sometimes you can see it and sometimes you can't. In my case, most of the time you can see it because I have one leg. I had cancer in my 20s at 21 and 26. It was in my left leg, in the nerve of my left leg, the motor nerve, which was very unusual. There was only one other case they knew of it at the time, and took 10 doctors to figure out what was wrong with my leg, why it hurt so much. I was at Carnegie Mellon University in my junior year because even though I'd been working professionally and all over the place and I had a huge resume, when it came to college, I wanted to get my professional training at the first theater professional training program in the country, which was Carnegie Mellon University. So I was in junior year of a very rigorous training program. Really, it's not for sissies. It was really for strong people. Something was wrong with my leg. And I kept going from doctor to doctor. My mom never gave up. Thank God. She's, okay, we'll get the 10th opinion, and she's, I know you're in pain, so we're going to find out. And when they diagnosed me in February of 1977, it was actually in New York. I was flown from Cleveland to New York to the Neurological Institute, right here in New York, where I ended up living. But they found it, this huge whopping tumor in my leg. And at that time, there was a doctor who had another way of dealing with this. He had one other patient who had this. They took the motor nerve out, left me with a left leg. So I still had two legs. I went back to school. I finished with my class. I wore a brace on my leg. And the great thing is that I got the part of Laura in Glass Menagerie in Summerstock because, well, I got it because they liked my acting. And then they found out later I had a brace on my leg. They said, we didn't know you had a brace. It was under my tights. And they said, we had no idea. We thought you were walking that way because you wanted to be Laura in your audition. And but I did graduate with them and went to London, studied in London, toured Europe with a theater company, for a British theater company doing a show, worked in Copenhagen, came back to the States and moved to Boston, where I was choreographing and singing in a concert at Berkeley Performance Center because a friend of mine was a student there. And for his big project, he did a Fats Waller concert, and said, if you're coming back to the States, come to Boston. So I did. And so that got me right into the theater scene in Boston. And but somewhere in the fifth year leading up to my fifth anniversary of surviving cancer, my leg started to really, really hurt the same exact way it had before. And it turns out the little amount of nerve that was left in my leg had cancer in it and another tumor. So this time I went to Mass General in Boston, thank God. Best place. Really fantastic. And Dr. Mankin told me he was crushed because he was like, because you're a performer, you dance and sing, but we're going to have to amputate. That's the best way to go. But if you've done this well on a leg with a brace that had no motor nerve in it, and you've danced all over Europe, an artificial leg won't be a problem for you. I totally thought that was great because I'd been living in a lot of pain. I mean, this thing was painful. Even when I was paralyzed from the knee down, paralyzation does not mean it isn't painful. You get these pins and needles all the time, and it was really terrible. So I thought, okay, good, fresh start. But I was in the middle of rehearsals for a show when I got the diagnosis that the cancer had returned. I was in rehearsal directing and performing in Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris in Boston, a production in Boston. And so I found out, okay, it's a recurrence. The thing I had dreaded. I had known that this could happen. They had made me sign papers to say I understood this may not be the solution when I was 21. I'd had chemo, I had radiation, but it came back anyways. So I said, okay, let's do it right away because I've got a show opening April 15th and I don't have much time. We got to get this going. And they were like, oh, well, I suppose we could wait if the tumor's been growing all this. No, we have to do this now so I can get back to the theater. So literally I didn't take it. He said, you want to think about this? And I go, no, I have a show to open. So I had a meeting with the cast around my hospital bed, like Winston Churchill used to do. And I was born on Winston Churchill's birthday. So this was, nothing new to me. With the cast, the musical director and the stage manager, and said, here's this. And I literally, when I realized I was going to have the amputation, I wrote down the schedule for the next 2 weeks. I said, I'm going to have my leg amputated on Tuesday. I've got to learn how to walk again, or just get up and walk, and then I'll be back at rehearsals. So you have 2 weeks to learn the music. So they worked with the musical director. Of course, the musical director said to me, but you've never lost your leg before. How do you know that this is going to work? And I'm going, I had cancer 5 years ago. I had a paralyzed leg for 5 years. I pretty much think everything's going to be fine. So she didn't believe me, but the stage manager did believe me, and the cast, and my sister was one of the musicians. Everybody said, if she says she's going to do it, we're going to do it. They rehearsed for 2 weeks. I learned how to walk on one leg. They couldn't make me an artificial leg fast enough. So I went back to rehearsals on one leg in crutches, on leave of absence every night from the hospital. Would come back to the hospital, sleep. The next day I'd go back to rehearsals. We opened the show on time 4 weeks after my amputation on April 15th of 1982. I was on stage with a bucket and a pole instead of an artificial leg. I had a preliminary kind of, thing under my long dress. I used crutches. And I had designed a set that had steps in it. I went up the steps with my crutches, sang Marika from the little turret that me and the designer had created, and the show was great. It was great. And then Evening Magazine used to be a TV thing after the news, where they did stories on people, and Boston picked up what I was doing and did a story about it, and that helped a lot of people come and see the show, and it was great. And so the truth is that in both cases, the first operation and the first cancer, the second cancer, I had something I had to get back to, which was the gift of my life, is that I didn't have time to sit around and feel sorry for myself or even worry about it. I just knew I had a goal. I had to get back to school and graduate with my class. That was my goal at Carnegie Mellon. And I had a show to open. I don't know any other person who's lost a leg and opened in a show 4 weeks later. I don't, but there could be people who have done that. But
Right.
I think the idea is when you know you have something, you put everything aside and you say, that's my goal. That's what I'm going to do. And even in times like this, it's good to have a goal. And when I think about the past year of COVID, I was busy all year long. I kept saying to myself, Anita, this is a chance to slow down. You lost 6 jobs. You're not going to Japan. You're not going to London. You're not going to San Francisco. You're not doing any of those gigs. So you can relax, read some books. And I did read some books, but it didn't take me long before it was like, hey, I could write more songs. I wrote 4 songs. I wrote a comedy. We had a wedding in our living room because my dear daughter's wedding had to be canceled. The beautiful
Oh,
Nahant Beach wedding in New England was canceled it was a March 21st wedding. It was the first day of spring. Everything was planned. It was gorgeous, going to be gorgeous. Her dress, exquisite. I mean, everything was right. And then we heard that everybody had to quarantine.
right.
Well, I set up everything in the living room here, right here. Had a long box that usually holds artificial legs in it, but I had this box. I put the chuppah cloth over it with my grandfather's prayer shawl over it, which would have been over the chuppah.
Right.
And then on top of the box, we put my laptop that you're looking at right now. And my sister, Rachel from Cleveland, Reverend Rachel, she officiated on Zoom.
How
So
wonderful.
her face was at the top of this cloth, which was a prayer shawl. So it looked like a rabbi. She looked like a rabbi. And they walked in from the bedroom into the living room. And my husband brought her in, and then they did the wedding right here with the backdrop, which was supposed to be the ocean up in Nahant Beach. But now I'll show you what it was. New York City.
Oh, New York City.
See
Love
that?
it.
That was the backdrop for the wedding. I said, Holland, there are worse things than to have the backdrop of Midtown Manhattan. And she was not consolable because it really was so upsetting. But now they've had their first anniversary, and they have a plan to go back to where it was going to be and to have an actual wedding of probably next year. So it will be the reenactment. But I have to say, it was a gorgeous ceremony right here with 60 windows on Zoom, which represented about 120 people from all over
How
witnessing
wonderful.
her wedding.
And
But that was one of the things. And I've written now 3 plays since that COVID, and done plenty of interviews, did a concert live on Zoom. I've been so busy. I haven't stopped. My children's choir, we wrote a song and we did a Hanukkah celebration live, socially distanced downtown in December. And then for the holiday of Purim, where you always do a little play, which
right.
reenacts story of Purim Spiel. Well, I wrote one based on Wicked, and my children's choir did it live outside in February, at the end of February, but it was freezing cold. It had been so warm, and then it was
Right. I
freezing.
remember. Yeah.
My fingers nearly got frostbite playing, but the kids were totally in. Instead of having full costumes, they had hats that showed which group of people they were with, and I made signs that would explain where we were. It was like a silent movie, only with songs, and and all of these things have happened in the past year. And I think that that's what keeps us going. That's what helps us survive. Well, maybe just me, because not everybody needs to do those things to help them survive. But me, I just kept saying, you could rest now. No, I need to go swimming because the pool is now, I can reserve a lane at the pool. So I kept swimming 3 times a week and doing my Pilates on the floor because I couldn't have a class. But I'm motivated, self-motivated. And my daughter, I call her a self-cleaning oven because she's self-motivated, because right after the wedding, they moved up to Boston, the Boston area, and both got jobs in Cambridge. He works at Harvard and she works at a school. She's teaching second grade because she is a master's education, and she's passionate about education. So her dream, as opposed to yours,
Right.
dream was actually to teach, and she's living her dream, and they're in a beautiful place, and it's great. So she hasn't stopped working. Teachers right now are working 48/7. That's what she says, that they never stop.
Right.
They're working in their sleep, just because whether it's in person or virtual, and her school alternated, two completely different kinds of teaching. So, but the advantage of the Zoom classroom was she could bring her mom into the Zoom classroom to talk about what? Obstacles, how you get over obstacles. Because the kids were learning to do things differently. Even at second grade, they were like,
Sure.
it was not easy. And so I showed them my leg, and my artificial leg, which has a mermaid inside it. And I showed them me, and I walked around on crutches. And I did that also with another Boston group called Urban Improv, that goes to schools and act out things that help them to understand situations like drugs, racism. I mean, they cover all kinds of things, and they have a disability unit. And for 25 years, I've been going up to Boston to do this unit in person, but now we had it online. So we did stuff about that. And when we showed a scene where I did an audition, and now auditions are all on Zoom. So they won't necessarily see that you have one leg or have a disability. And the kids didn't see it, didn't realize it. And then I got up, I said, oh, could I check my calendar? And I got up on my crutches and walked back and came back. And in the scene that we were doing, the other actors who were playing the casting people were like, because they had decided I was the best person who'd come in today. And now they were like, and the kids talked about it. You know, what is discrimination? What is prejudice? But they also talked about like what they were going through this year, and what were the tools for survival? What were the tools to get them through? So it's pretty cool. When you talk about lessons learned, everybody's learning lessons this year, as you said.
Well, the biggest lesson that I take away from what you've done is that you turned a disability into an ability. It's like, and I'm so proud of you because I wear hearing aids. And when I first got the hearing aids, and I got it because I ended up with a tumor in my left ear. And I was
Wow.
told the tumor had to come out. I was told it was benign. Found out afterwards because I had a terrible doctor. He put me on medication, never asked what the medication was. Um, and it had been malignant. And, I couldn't understand. All of a sudden now I'm losing my hearing. And so I go back to another doctor, and the other doctor says to me, well, you've lost your hearing, but there's something I don't like. And I said, what? He says, well, I'm looking in the ear where they did the surgery, and you have what looks like tentacles going to your brain. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, I'm going to send you back to your ear surgeon. I said, oh, no, you're not. I said, send me to somebody else. And I found the most fantastic doctor. Um, I was probably within months away of these tentacles going to the brain. But to make a long story short, I had to start wearing hearing aids because it's all reconstructed. So it's not my natural hearing. And at the same time, he accidentally decided to look at my right ear, even though there was nothing wrong. And we lost hearing there too. So in the beginning, when I went back to work, I was wearing hearing aids and I didn't tell anybody. I was just adjusting to the hearing aids because if you don't see them, you don't know it's there. You're not going to say that I'm too old, I have a disability, or what. But within 5 years, I realized that I couldn't hide it anymore. I was struggling. And when I came out and pulled my hair back and said, listen, I wear hearing aids and I can hear, but not to the quality that I heard before. So I need you to work with me. Well, my company didn't. Okay. And that's when I left and got into podcasting because I knew I could control it. But I also knew that I could tell people and they weren't going to look at me and say, well, you can't do what you're doing because I was doing it. And when I first heard your story, it was like, I am so sorry that I wasted 5 years of my life hiding because it would have been much easier for me. But now I realize that I don't care what that disability is that we may have, what that illness is that we might have. There is a way from deep inside to find a path that can turn that into an ability. And um, and that's why I didn't bring it up in the beginning because I want people to know who Anita is. Okay. Um, and if they Google you, they will be just totally amazed at what you've done. Um, but my other question I do want to ask, because I know that you're married, you have a child. Okay. So this all happened before you met your husband, correct?
Right. I lost my leg before I met my husband. In fact, I met my husband at an audition where I had my artificial leg on, so he didn't know at first. And then at the first rehearsal, I took it off and put it in the, because after rehearsals, I would put it away somewhere and come back to it the next day. And he and the rest of the company were like, well, he was intrigued by that. And I think that sort of helped actually.
Well,
'Cause
and
within two
it's
years, we were married.
and that's the other thing that I want people to hear is that there is w- we have to be aware of what life is really all about. And life isn't about having two normal legs because you have a life. You're living, you're breathing, you're acting, you're singing, you're creating. Um, and how wonderful.
Yeah. In fact, I should probably say this. I'm supposed to, right now, I'm in a film that people can find online. It's called Social Fitness. It's a 5-minute film. It's a short film for the Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. And if you look up Social Fitness Easter Seals on YouTube, you'll find it, or Facebook. If you go to my Facebook page, Anita Hollander, you can see all the things I do, or my website, anitahollander.com. And this Thursday, Roundabout Theater, which is a Broadway theater, is doing a festival of short plays, which my play is in, a new play that I wrote is in. And I'm very proud of this play, which I shot right here, partly at the piano, partly I play two roles. And one is a 95-year-old woman in a nursing home in Cleveland. It's mentioned. And the other role, well, she's in a nursing home and she has a little Alzheimer's, and suddenly a woman appears in her room. And this woman is from the 1940s. So we go from 2020, we've got a woman from 1940 who is disabled and was a survivor of the T4 Nazi
Oh,
program, which was people with disabilities were put in this hospital into this program, and it was horrible, and I won't get into it, but she was a victim of that, but a survivor. And she shows up, but she shows up to warn this 95-year-old woman that nursing homes are not a good place to be right now. She's heard terrible things. You don't want to end up like what happened to me. You should get out of here. And she wants to help to get the 95-year-old woman who's isolated in this nursing home out of the nursing home. But what's interesting is that within this which really serious story that's underneath this, there's humor, and there's music. And the 95-year-old woman is based on my Aunt Nori, Lenore Fletcher, Clevelander, who was my father's sister. So her mother was my grandmother who sang with the Cleveland Orchestra. And Aunt Nori, very musical, very musical. So since she was isolated in an assisted living facility, I would call her every Sunday during COVID, all last summer, and would sing with her. We'd sing everything, Rodgers and Hart, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Gershwin, Kern, all of her stuff, all the stuff she loved. And she sang all of it with me. Even with Alzheimer's, the songs she remembered. And you've heard that, I'm sure. And then we wrote a song together about what she saw from her window, which was empty parking lots. And I wrote it based on her words. She described Saks Fifth Avenue across the street. There's a museum over there, but nobody's here. Nobody's in the parking lot. There's nobody here. And I can't go out and play the piano in the hallway. I took it all and made it into a song. And that song is in the play, in the 5-minute play. And it ends up, Lenore is singing it and playing it. And then Frida, her mystical visitor, sings too. But I'm really excited about it. So if you look up Roundabout Theater Reverb, or if you just look on my Facebook page, you'll see information about it, because I can't wait till people see it on Thursday.
Well,
Sorry, I just wanted to let people know I'm doing
I'm
that.
so glad you talked about that. So this Thursday, we can actually watch it then.
Yes, you just have to go to Roundabout Theater.
Okay.
And right on the front page of Roundabout Theater's website, it says register. You just have to register to see it. It'll be at 6:00 on Thursday. But the social fitness film is out there now, and
Right.
you can see it on YouTube. You can see it on Facebook. If you're looking anywhere, just look for Anita Hollander on Facebook. If you see tulips and wooden shoes, that's the Dutch Anita Hollander, and she's great. But I'm the one that has social fitness. Literally, that's my wallpaper. So you'll see that. And it's funny. It's so funny.
Well,
And it's about how we're dealing with COVID and how we have to retrain ourselves to actually deal with people when we get out of this. And it's so funny. I really love it. I think everybody owes themselves a laugh to do
Well,
that.
I told you, I watched it the other day, and my husband walked into the office. Now, typically, when the door is closed to the office studio, nobody's supposed to walk in, but he heard me laughing, and he didn't think I was recording, and he just walked in, and then he said, "Start that all over again." And I did, and he goes, I got to watch it by myself. And so I went over on the other side of the desk, turned on his computer. I sent him the link. He watched it and he goes, "Who is this woman?" And I said, "You'll find out on Monday when I interview her." So, um,
I love that role. And it was my idea because the team got together and said, what are we going to write? And I was like, well, I want to be, because it had to be a mockumentary, not a funny documentary. And I said, well, I want to be the host. I would like to be the BBC documentarian. And I had so much fun with it. And I'm so glad you liked it.
oh,
We
it
now
was,
have like over 5,000 views just within a few days. We're just trying to get people to watch it because we all deserve a laugh right now. And it's a great laugh.
well, we will put, all your links
Oh,
in the
great.
information section of today's podcast. And for those of you who are listening, Anita has connected me with her sister Rachel, who she says is amazing. And so we're going to be talking to Rachel here shortly. And, you know, all I can do is say, God bless your parents for allowing you and your sisters to be the people that you want to be. And we just want to wish you a lot of love and happiness. And when you come to Cleveland, let's get together and
Yes.
we can go out for a good corned beef sandwich. Okay.
Yes.
Sounds wonderful. Have a great day. And thank you so much. Bye bye
Thank
now.
you.